Hey guys, how's it going? It is your boy, Manga Drew, and I'm here to do a different kind of video today. And what video am I doing? Well, it's going to be a sort of rebuttal / retort video to a specific YouTuber's video when it pertains to a most recent development when it comes to All Might as a character. And if you haven't seen the video, I would recommend go watching it before you come to this video, because I am going to be critiquing and breaking down some aspects and some critiques that this YouTuber makes about the series so far, and really give my own thoughts on why these interpretations may not be the best suited for the actual series at large. So, with that, let's just dive right into it and really talk about the video in question. And the video in question is How My Hero Academia Ruined All Might by the YouTuber named Asaratha HS, or I will be calling him Asa HS for short. And to pretty much go into the summary of this video, he believes that the most recent chapter as of this video being uploaded when it comes to the proper translations is Manga chapter 387 or 386. And the main critique of this video is the idea that the ending of this chapter ruins All Might's character, and I'm going to be discussing why that is actually not the case, and why, most likely than not, this ending very much heavily plays into who the character of All Might, or should I say who Toshinori is. So most likely there are going to be spoilers from the manga, and most likely some spoilers from the most recent chapters, but for the most part I will be sticking to the points that he makes in this video and anything that comes before chapter 386, 387, and what I'm pretty much going to do is show clips that he makes within the video, and then give my arguments against it, and give a little bit more better understanding of why this may be a very much misinterpretation of this series' main themes and ideas as a whole. And without the way, let's just dive right into it with the first thing that I really want to talk about.
What's next for the previous symbol of peace? Why did All Might not simply die at Kamino? When will we get to see him in action again? My Hero Academia, unfortunately, has contradictory answers to these questions.
And to start off, he brings up this idea that there are two different sides of the story that are being contradictory. But the issue with this idea is that it's actually not contradictory, because both answers can exist in the same story, which will be discussed later. But to expand on what he means in this moment, it's the idea that when it comes to Toshinori All Might as a character, that the story is pushing him towards the idea that he shouldn't be a hero on the front line, but should be a hero in other means, and that having him act as a hero that is fighting on the front lines contradicts the idea that the story is building up that he should be a hero that works on the sidelines and works in these other forms of heroism. And pretty much, that is exactly the opposite of what the story is trying to say, and we will be discussing that a little bit later on.
And before comic book fans get mad at me again, yes, I understand that comics are more nuanced than this. Blame Horikoshi, not me.
And he brings up this argument when it comes to comic books and when it comes to nuances, and how he believes that comics now are very much nuanced, which is the case. However, if we look at the comic that All for One was inspired by, this is most likely inspired by older comics, which are not as nuanced as the ones that we have right now. And when it comes to the comic books that we see that inspired All for One, they seem to be very simplistic in nature, and are reminiscent of older cartoons where the villains are objectively bad while the heroes are objectively good.
So let us recap All Might's journey. He was forced to confront the dangerous lack of self-worth his reign gave him through Midoriya, and while stumbling through the dark looking for a purpose, is told by two separate people that his presence alone can inspire greatness, that he has more than the power he once had, and to find his value in this new world. So can someone explain to me why, for the love of fucking God, him going out in an ass-pulled suit of armor is the solution?
And here's where we're getting to how Asa interprets All Might's journey, and how this may be an actual misinterpretation of the actual journey that All Might goes through. Because All Might's journey, or should I say Toshinori's, is realizing that he can still be a hero without power, aka a quirk, but this does not mean that he has to be a hero on the sidelines and not in the middle of battle. The story is not saying that All Might should find another way to be a hero without a quirk, but that he still can be a hero without a quirk in other ways, and that he can still be a fighter on the front line because that's just who he is. Deep down, Toshinori is a hero, but will sacrifice his life to save others.
Does it fit into the themes of utilizing other methods of heroism? No, absolutely not, as this is the same old reckless and destructive behavior that the All Might of the past would have exemplified.
And here's the thing. The answer to this question is yes, because fighting on the front line is still a method of heroism. And while yes, this is similar to his reckless nature that Toshinori exemplifies, what Toshinori exemplifies is the selflessness, which is what heroism is all about. And at this moment, he is being self-sacrificing and selfless. All Might would be reckless if he went into this fight without a way to fight, or if he was heavily injured before he fought All For One.
Putting his life on the line in an otherwise losing battle goes against everything All Might has represented over Act 2 and 3.
And here's the thing about this part. No, it does not. Literally every hero that continues to fight post the Paranormal Liberation War arc, and even in the Second War, are literally fighting a losing battle. The reason why they continue to fight is because they are inspired by All Might. If Toshinori did not fight in a losing battle, then he goes against who he is. The battle he has at Kamino was a losing battle because he had no power left because he transferred his power to Deku, but continued to fight because that's what heroes do. The idea to go beyond plus ultra embodies continuing to fight a losing battle until you find the strength to push onward towards victory. Putting his life on the line in a losing battle is literally what every user of One For All has done prior to Toshinori. Even then, that's what it means to be a hero. Even if you know that you can't win the battle or that you might lose, you still continue to fight.
Not a single person interpreted this as going out and risking his own life in a potentially fruitless attempt to halt the strongest man in the world, because All Might's character does not exist in the vacuum of random dialogue pulled out of your ass to justify garbage.
And here's the thing about this point. No one in the manga interpreted Toshinori's arc this way because they don't have the concept of actual character arcs in the story. They do recognize that characters do change, but not in the sense of them having a quote-unquote character arc. And of course, in this moment, no one interprets this as putting his life on the line, because what he is saying and what he is thinking are two different things. He isn't saying what he's thinking at this moment. He is not saying it out loud. And when it comes to this interpretation outside of the story, many people, including myself, believe this as a possibility based off the dialogue that you are trying to throw away and discredit. Also, that dialogue is not random. It literally comes from the self-reflection Toshinori had after his conversation with Stain. The one when he realized that nothing made him more powerful than his own ideals and belief. That the power was not the core of who All Might was, it was Toshinori. Which ties into the idea that his main objective was not to find other ways to be a hero, but learn that he is still a hero without powers or without a quirk. And this one singular panel of inner dialogue disproved the idea that Toshinori's journey does not involve actively being on the front line. Yes, there are other ways to be a hero, but that does not mean that they are the best ways to be a hero for Toshinori. The story gives other options for Toshinori to be a hero in different ways, but fighting the bad guy was never not an option. The story is saying that these are other ways to be a hero, not that these other ways are better, or that Toshinori should only do it these other ways.
In the world of My Hero Academia that has spent countless arcs and chapters reinforcing that there are other ways to be a hero.
And I feel as if I'm repeating myself from this point because, once again, while there are other ways to be a hero shown in the series, Toshinori's journey is realizing that he does not need a quirk to be a hero, either via other methods or his initial method of fighting on the front line. Providing possible alternatives to heroics does not mean a person can't do the original idea of heroics, aka fighting the bad guy. That's like saying someone who wants to be a doctor pursuing the line of veterinary medicine can't be a doctor when it comes to medicine or a doctor when it comes to dentistry solely because those alternatives are presented to him. They can still follow down the same path, but recognize that there are other paths that they could potentially go down.
His own heroics even in MVA when he tried to save that woman from the falling pole. He practices his own heroics.
And I want to bring up this small snippet here because this proves the idea that Toshinori at his core will try and help people without powers. He did not realize it at this moment because he was still focused on and believed he needed power to be a hero.
And after experiencing technically a defeat, All Might had found his purpose off of the battlefield, and it didn't require power.
And this part right here pretty much solidifies the idea that Asa HS has for All Might's journey. And it's the idea that Toshinori found his purpose outside of combat. And no, Toshinori did not find his purpose outside of combat. He found another purpose, but it was never his sole purpose. His purpose was and will always be to be a hero. Whether or not that's being a support hero or a hero that fights on the front line. Toshinori is learning that both are equally important to his ideals of what it means to be a hero, whether or not he has a quirk or not.
As Stain and Aizawa put it, it required Toshinori Yagi to be himself.
And when it comes to this point, Toshinori being himself is literally going out and fighting the bad guy. He said it himself. He could not stand by when he saw destruction around him. Stain tells Toshinori to come after him, and Aizawa told Toshinori to remain the same brash person he always was. For these ideas to occur, Toshinori has to fight on the battlefield because that's just who he is. Heck, we see that even when he lost his power, he still constantly trained so that he can continue to be stronger. He didn't need to train if he was solely going to be on the sidelines as a support hero. He trained because he realized and knows that he is a hero that wants to be on the front line because that's where he believes he can save the most people. Or at least save the people that are most important to him.
This line right here from All Might talks about how this has always been his battle, and that is such a slap in the face to everything that had come before. The theme of passing the torch has now been usurped nearly 3 times in this series alone.
And this point is very interesting because Toshinori is still passing the torch over to Deku because he's passing on the torch by instilling the ideals into Deku and the rest of Class 1A. The battle that he's having right now is not the battle between All For One and One For All, but All For One the person versus Toshinori the hero. The torch of All For One versus One For All was passed on to Deku when he's fighting against Tomura Shigaraki. Endeavor wanted Shoto to surpass All Might for his own personal goal, while Shoto wanted to spite his father, but still acted to be a hero outside of his father's wants and dreams. If anything, Shoto got the torch from All Might, not Endeavor, because Shoto was inspired to be a hero by All Might, not Endeavor. Also, prominence in a story does not override the torch being passed. And in the case of All For One, he was never keeping the torch for anyone else besides himself.
Completely disregarding, I don't know, Kamino, the arc where 2 powerhouses left it all to their more nuanced successors, as well as completely disregarding any potential development from Villain Hunt.
And this point is a little bit baffling for me because this moment happened because of the development from Villain Hunt, where Toshinori learns that he can still be a hero without a quirk, which ties into working on the front lines.
This was nobody's fight in particular, except quirkless All Might, I guess.
And this is also a very funny moment because Toshinori isn't the only character that is fighting 1v1 against a villain. Because while this is no one fight in particular, we still have specific characters fighting against specific villains. Dabi versus Todoroki, Toga versus Uravity, Deku versus Tomura. The point is that everyone is doing their part to obtain victory versus Deku defeating All For One, Tomura, Dabi, and Toga on his own.
It regresses Toshinori for the negative, completely undoing him finding his purpose outside of the battlefield, and removing not only his recognition of self-worth, but also bucking the story's idea of it. All the while undoing the spamming of other methods of heroism the story has been obnoxiously stating to us since the final war's beginning.
And with this point, I would argue that Toshinori doesn't change by any substantial margin. He has development, but he remains relatively the same throughout the story. Now, this does not mean that he does not change, but that his core identity does not change, especially compared to Shoto, Bakugo, and Endeavor. Having Toshinori completely cutting off the idea of being a hero on the front line heavily changes his character. And as we can see, that is not a change that happens with him. And what I said in the prior point ties into this one because the point that he brings up is not very valid because this moment does not regress his character for the negative because his journey was never about finding his purpose outside of the battlefield, but learning that he still can be a hero without a quirk, whether it's on the battlefield or on the sidelines. This is once again a point that I have to bring up constantly and is not a contradiction within the story. If anything, Toshinori has always had his self-worth because he always believed he had worth as a hero fighting on the front lines, but now has more worth fighting on the front lines without a quirk. And what this act does is prove that all ways of being a hero is valid. And the only way the passing of the torch gets bucked is if Deku purely fights against All For One and Toshinori fights against Tomura, because as Tomura is Deku's villain, All For One is Toshinori's villain.
Suggestion is that All Might isn't actually going to fight and he's just going to be a distraction for All For One getting to Shigaraki, and this presupposes a couple things. First of all, that All Might with support gear will be able to form any meaningful distraction against one of the strongest men in the world who is only getting stronger.
And from here, I don't think Asa HS understands how much of a distraction Toshinori will be for All For One. Because Toshinori, even without the suit, is a distraction for All For One by his own very existence. His very existence instills anger and fear inside of All For One like no other character has done before. Even if he's able to distract All For One for a single second, he is serving a purpose. And even then, he does not need to do massive damage to All For One. Even if the attack hurts All For One as if it was a paper cut, any amount of damage, no matter how big or small, speeds up the rewind effect.
If support gear can stand up to All For One in any meaningful way, then that's just bullshit. The strongest support gear we have seen in the series is something like Bakugo's gauntlets, and that's because all support gear exists to bolster an already existing quirk, not to stand in for one.
And this point right here ties into the previous point. But to expand upon it a little bit more, the support gear does not need to stand up against All For One, but it has to be enough of a hindrance to accelerate his rewind, which Hawks was able to do with his sword. So if Hawks with a normal sword can accelerate the rewind, a general battle suit piloted by All Might could do it just as well, if not better. And here's the thing. Not all support gear is meant to bolster the quirk. Yes, many support gear is meant to bolster the quirk itself, but support gear in general is meant to bolster the fighting capability of the heroes or the user of the tool. From the cement guns used by Gang Orca sidekicks to any equipment created by Mei Hatsume, they are not specific to the user itself or the user's quirk, but the hero work. Heck, many of the items used by the villains and civilians created by Detnerat are mainly to help fight, and none of them are essentially quirk specific most of the time.
If support gear was capable of making anybody a capital H hero, as in the occupation, then we would have seen that throughout the story.
And once again, tying into the previous point, I want to ask, do you realize that support items are typically only used by heroes, or only heroes in training have access to these support items? Because unless you're an already existing hero or a hero in training, which a quirkless individual can't realistically obtain unless they are a hero or a hero in training, which is most likely never going to happen within the series of My Hero Academia because we have never seen a quirkless individual that has not been given a quirk be a hero or a hero in training. Or if you obtain these items illegally, then the average quirkless individual or even a normal individual can't fight on their own. We've seen what happens when you put these weapons in the hands of just normal civilians. They are untrained and unknowledgeable of how to use these equipments effectively and cause more harm than good. Which is most likely these items are specifically restricted to heroes and heroes in training who are specifically trained on how to use these equipment properly as to not do massive damage or harm the people in question.
Now, if you pull yourself up by your bootstraps like Quirkless All Might, you can get enough money to become a hero. Something that could be a pungent side of world building if it didn't reek of an ass pull for a hype cliffhanger.
And the point that we're going to talk about here, and this is getting a little bit headcanon-y based off of what Asa HS is saying, but who said that Toshinori bought this suit? As far as we know, with the main canon of the story, Toshinori does not have that much wealth with him. And as far as we know, he was given this suit because he has connections, because he had a quirk and was literally the #1 hero. Heck, Deku got his full gauntlets based off the connections that All For One had alone. So as far as we know, he was just given this suit. Also, earlier on, you said that this was an as pull of a support item, but yet we've seen technology in the world of My Hero Academia that exists on this level, ranging from the full gauntlet that Deku has on his arm, to the literal giant robots that tower over skyscrapers, even to the point of having jets that literally shoot out lasers. Heck, it was even hinted at that this is possibly something that could occur by a color page of an All Might robot.
Second response is that All For One doesn't need to be stalled. Ignoring that he is currently in warp range of Shigaraki apparently, My Hero Academia is not real.
And now we're getting to an argument that I just do not understand and just really can't agree with. And it's the idea that, oh, this story is not real and that the writer can just make anything up because it's a fiction. Well, that is true in a very narrow sense. You know what that creates? A very poorly structured story. Because while a story does not have to be realistic in the sense of it has to be a representation of the real world, It has to be realistic in the sense that everything within the story makes sense within the story as a whole based off what the story has established prior. Basically, they shouldn't break the rules of the story that they've already established, because doing so breaks those rules, the structure, and the continuity of a story. A good story plays by the restrictions and the circumstances created within the story. Toshinori is the only one that can be here because every other character is serving a specific purpose and can't reach the location of All for One without breaking the rules of the world. And the reason why it's Toshinori is because he is the only character that will keep All for One's attention completely on him. And tying into the next point that we're going to be having,
anybody else could have stopped him here, like the Stars and Stripes fighter jets.
Because an example that he gives is the Star and Stripe fighter jets, and the reason they can't be there specifically is because they were stationed at the UA airspace to support the defeat of Tomura Shigaraki, as well as doing so would go against the ideas that they have about supporting Deku and believing in Deku. And literally everyone else is preoccupied fighting against the other villain, so there's literally no one else who can help without breaking the story. And pretty much anyone else that isn't All Might Toshinori in this moment will not serve as a distraction for All for One in this moment. And going into the final part of the video that I really want to go against is this idea.
When your character is about finding a purpose or value in your own life after being subjected to the consequences of your actions and ideology, having the grand lesson at the end of the day be, okay, you're gonna die now, never finding happiness and doing something recklessly in vain, kind of sucks. Especially after the story has already hammered home why you shouldn't be doing reckless things in vain.
Because here's the thing, All Might's ideology was never the issue. It's how he went about doing it. The entirety of Dark Deku was about the idea that All Might, who inspired Deku to do what he did, was not wrong. Deku during that arc was not wrong. The issue was how he was going about doing it without having help from other people. And when it comes to All Might's happiness, All Might dying as a hero to save people is his happiness. This is the hero that All Might Toshinori is, and this is what makes All Might happy. Sure, he smiles to hide the fear, but also believes that this is what he wants to do. And doing this, quote, reckless action won't be in vain, especially if it leads to the most likely occurrence of the defeat of All for One's main body. Or, as many people theorized, including myself, leading to the completion of One for All itself. But yeah, that's pretty much everything that I really want to go over when it comes to my rebuttal and arguments against Asa HS and this idea that this My Hero Academia chapter ruined All Might. Because in reality, what this chapter really does is exemplify who All Might is and who All Might always was. A character who is, for their core ideals and beliefs, a hero. Whether it's on the front line or on the sideline, you cannot get rid of his heroic spirit. And that his willingness to die in this moment to make sure that his predecessor Deku is able to defeat Tomura Shigaraki, or at least achieve what he believes to be defeat, ties into the idea of what it means to be a hero. And how All Might is the perfect hero with one major flaw. That he never really relied on others to help him. And that in this moment, potentially that flaw is going to come and rear his ugly head, but it's going to be a twist where it's most likely going to be revealed that he's not actually doing it alone, and that he actually has others supporting and helping him, which will lead to the defeat of All for One, even if it means he dies. Because at this moment, Deku, for the most part, has reached the status of being a hero. There's nothing else that All Might can really teach or really mentor Deku at this moment. So with nothing else for Toshinori to do, the last thing that he can do to guarantee his predecessor's safety and growth to the future is to potentially give up his life, because that is something that heroes do. So yeah, that's all I really wanted to say. This is something that has been bugging me for a little bit when it comes to All Might's character and how people may not necessarily have the right idea of who All Might is as a character. So I decided to make this video as an excuse to really express how I do believe that All Might as a character is about to reach his final form. But let me ask you, what do you actually feel about this? Do you actually agree with Asa, or do you agree more with my points? I would like to see your comments down below. And if you want to see more content like this, you should probably subscribe to my YouTube channel and hit that notification bell to be notified whenever I upload more content like this. So do all that cool jazz, and hopefully I'll be able to catch you in my next video. Goodbye!